A Hellforge is a fallen forge world dedicated wholly to the ruinous powers and controlled by the Dark Mechanicus. This infernal forge of a fallen heretic scion of the cult Mechanicus reeks with the terrible smells of burning blood and scorched flesh, fed by souls as well as promethium and steel, constantly churning out arms, armaments, and demon engines for their Dark Mechanicus lords and their Traitor Legion allies. The legacy of the first Hellforges began during the galaxy-wide civil war known as the Horus Heresy. Aside from the human component in the traitors' ranks, the power of the Mechanicum and their kin were also of great importance to the conflict. Within the ranks of the newly declared Dark Mechanicum, as the elements of the Mechanicum who declared for the War Master Horus became known among their loyalist brethren, could be found powerful elements of the Martian priesthood, the Ordo Reductor, and the Legio Cybernetica, along with many of the feared Destructo cults and a number of subcults which had operated for long years on the edge of tech heresy, all drawn together by the Fabricator General, Kelbor Hall. Within them came the support of more than half of the legions of the Legio Titanicus, as well as a dozen of allied knight houses, and even Mars itself was lost to the Loyalists. The output and military powers of a forge world such as Sarum, Voss, Cyclothras, and Styges VIII have declared for the traitors, with others such as Anvilus, Inclandium, and Ryza paralyzed by civil war between their tech priest cohorts. The Dark Mechanicum hoped to restore the autonomy of the Mechanicum from the Imperium of Man. Their effort ultimately failed when Horus was slain by the Emperor during the epic Battle of Terra, and the loyalist elements of the Mechanicum succeeded in driving their chaos-corrupted brethren from the Red Planet and other bastions of the Machine God. Many of these so-called heretics of the Dark Mechanicum fled into the Eye of Terror alongside the other traitors after the Great Scouring, while the Imperium covered most of the territory across the galaxy that had been lost to Horus's traitor forces. In the aftermath of Horus's fall, many of the Dark Mechanicum who survived the subsequent purges found sanctuary within the various traitor legions and in dark corners of the Imperium, where their terrible arts have prospered and their undying hatred of the Imperium has festered down through the millennia. Within these dark realms, there are those servants of chaos who live beyond the normal ken of mortals, within a realm not entirely of the material universe and not entirely of the warp, a demon world, where the laws of nature and reason have been completely usurped by the whim of the ruinous powers. Here, demons roam freely and are constantly nourished by the twisting winds of sorcery as mortals become their playthings, with a value only as chaos champions or slaves. Demon worlds are a sanctuary for the worshippers of chaos, with the means and courage to flee to them. The Inquisition never rests in its effort to eliminate devotees of dark gods, but a demon world defies even their shadowy reach. A few demon worlds are dominated by the remnants of the Dark Mechanicus that once followed Horus. These Dark Mechanicus Hellforges are wholly given over to demon machines and infernal industries, where mills grind flesh and suffering is the currency used to make the insane visions of their nightmarish master's realm. Countless millions are enslaved to work in a world-spanning network of labyrinthian forges, churning out an endless supply of weapons and armaments for the traitor legion's long war against the Imperium. The masters of these Dark Mechanicus Hellforge worlds, most now half-demonic machines themselves, have long since left the shreds of their humanity behind, and are beholden to no one, be that mortal or chaos god. They sell or barter their unholy inventions and arms to the highest bidders, be they warlords, demagogues, chaos sorcerers, or even demon prince, without favors. And their coin of exchange is always the same: new raw materials, the flesh and souls of slaves for the Dark Forge world's unquenchable hunger. These fallen forge worlds are enclosed in a perpetual blanket of dark gray clouds. Below the clouds is the source, stack after stack of vertical pipes, rising even to the lower cloud decks and billowing thick smoke into the acrid air. No sign of the actual surface can be seen, for all is covered with layered factories, which are burning, creating, and forging night and day, though there are few who can tell the two apart, given the atmosphere. Robed figures wander without wasteful delay in their tasks, exposed cloth allowing glimpse of artful metallic limbs. Closer examination reveals more of the real nature of these dark worlds. Unhidden, clear to even a casual glance, is the mark of the ruinous powers. Runes and glyphs of unholy meaning litter walls, declaring patronage to the dark gods. Even the heretics carry these marks upon their branded flesh, their allegiance to the machine gun burned away from their synapses. Some notable forge worlds include Toil, which the demon Primarch Perturabo perverted the 8th ritual of possession, turning them against his enemies. Invoking Nurgle, Perturabo imbued his curse with extreme contingent and released it into the mechanical system of Toil, a former Imperial vassal forge world. Raw chaos spread throughout the machines, and the hidden manufactorums began to change. On the 8th day, giant cables bursted from the earth, demonic machines hunted the living, and many-legged cathedrals of industry prowled the wastes. The planet was ultimately scoured of all native flesh and has been transformed into a world shaped by unreality of the immaterium. Recent reports indicate that the Adeptus Mechanicus domain of Uringborg 1572 has fallen from the grace of the Emperor. Its foundries turned to production of the tools of damnation at the behest of traitor Magi, and the status of its attendant, Titan Legion, and legal separatists unknown. It is the Inquisition's belief that given current commitments in that region and the continued uncertainty regarding the fate or loyalty of the legal separatist Uringborg 1572 is for all intents and purposes lost to the Imperium. Certain lords of the Inquisition have long poised the existence of a domain of the fallen Mechanicus beyond the boundaries of the Imperium's realms. Some believe it to be a forge world long predating the Age of Strife, which was never contacted during the Great Crusade. Various legends have surfaced of a world of crippled hellsmiths that prostrated themselves before a cyclopean machine altar, sending up veneration in sonorous binary chants that echo weirdly through the immaterium, and can be perceived by the Inquisition's warped seers when the tides of the Sea of Souls rage especially strong. The Inquisition has recently learned of the Fenotian cell, whose unhallowed master believes Crucible Omega to be very real indeed, and that the altar its population worships is in fact a fully functional, standard template construct. Abhilum is a former Imperial vassal world now controlled by the Dark Mechanicus, and wholly dedicated to the ruinous powers. Much of the early history of this isolated world has been lost to the long passage of millennia. Abhilum was once considered a vital deep void way station, since it lay on the Armageddon Paramar Grand Conduit. The survivors of a mission group dispatched by the Inquisition to the Abhilum system recently returned and reported that the planet was now lost to the Imperium. They revealed that elements of the Dark Mechanicus, who had hidden beneath the surface of the world, employed forbidden rites of technopyroclasm to cause the many dormant volcanoes present on Abhilum to erupt as one, sealing the deaths of millions in a single moment. Worst was to come, for out of the rolling black clouds and rivers of molten rock charged an uncountable host of demon engines. It was estimated that the entire population of the planet has now fallen to the Dark Mechanicus, slaughtered, consumed, or dragged beneath the ground in fetters to tend the infernal forges below. It is believed by many within the Inquisition that Abhilum is now beyond any hope of deliverance. Furthermore, it is likely that Abhilum is already on the path to becoming a significant locus of production for infernal engines of war, and that soon the traitor legions and others dedicated to the ruinous powers will be able to procure the service of machines brought in from its forges. Crucible Omega is a supposed hellforge and dominion of the Dark Mechanicus, wholly dedicated to the ruinous powers. It has long been theorized that there exists a domain of the fallen Mechanicus beyond the boundaries of the Imperium, and that it was a forge world predating the Age of Strife, which was never contacted during the Great Crusade. Various legends have surfaced of a world of crippled hellsmiths that prostrate themselves before a cyclopean machine altar, sending up venerations in sonorous binaric chants that echoes weirdly through the immaterium, and can be perceived by Imperial warp seers when the tides of the Seas of Souls is especially strong. It has recently been learned by inquisitorial agents that a Fenonite cell and its unhallowed master believes Crucible Omega is a very real place, and that the altar its population worships is in fact a functional standard template construct. The Inquisition has mobilized available assets to ascertain the current status of this group of adversaries, and have recommended a convocation of an inquisitorial conclave at the earliest opportunity to debate the matter further. Crucible Omega's current status is unknown. Daisos was a soul forge occupied by the demon-binding Dark Mechanicus until the year 993 of the 41st millennia, when the Iron Warrior's warpsmith, Vostok Pistonhand, staged a coup against Daisos' Dark Masters. After a single solar night of bloodshed, the entire world was given over to the production of a demon engine for the warpsmith's army. Each new horror was slave to the Piston's Hand's will by the forbidden rite known as a concatechism. The warpsmith's chaos sorcerers summoned demon after demon to the soul forges, binding them into the flame with their iron-worded spells. The planet turned black with the smog of industry. Eventually, the Chaos God's gaze fell upon the wholesale abduction of their servants, and they were most displeased. 4 massive demonic legions materialized upon Daisos, one sent from each of the ruinous powers. United in their outrage, they proved unstoppable. Though Piston Hand's armies boasted thousands of mechanical terrors, the invaders seemed without numbers. Daisos was conquered within a solar month. As the demon engines broke apart and started to fight over the spoils of victory, the war for Daisos began anew. A former loyalist forge world located in the Ultima Segmentum, in Calaldium, was the homeworld of the Lego Farians, the Tiger-Eyes Titan Legion, before the outbreak of the Horus-heresy. The planet adapted to the savage worlds accordingly. They acquired additional human stock by raiding the feral population of the world, which brought echoes of barbarous cultures that began to infect the increasingly schismatic machine cult, propagated by the planet's Mechanicum. With the outbreak of the heresy, they declared for the War Master Horus. This world was cleansed by loyalist forces during the Great Scouring, and eventually brought back into the Imperial fold. A planet-wide industrial hell that would destroy the sanity of most mortals, the Iron Gast Foundry is a chaotic forge sworn to the glory of Khorne, the blood god. Bristling with vast brazen gun towers and spike-studded battlements, the Iron Gast Foundry is all but impervious to invasion. A conclave of warpsmiths rule over the Iron Gast Foundry, led by a cruel and violent slave driver known only as the Overseer. It is their oath that while a single soul remains to man the machineries of their global factory, it will never cease churning out weapons for the blood god's innumerable wars. The foundry produces everything from chain axes and hell-brute sarcophagi to vast demon engines such as the Lord of Skulls and the Lord of Battles. Their blood-encrusted runic circles flare night and day, dragging demons from the immaterium to be bounded into rank upon rank of waiting demon engines. This is a place of vast horrific industry, and serves as the weapon factory for a great many coronate demonkin warbands. The Overseer and his conclave maintain bloody pacts with such diverse coronate hosts as the Skull-Sworn, the Brazen Beasts, and the 8 Scarred. In return, they demand raw materials, junked war machines, precious metals, and corpses harvested from the fields of war. Retlaxy is an ancient fiefdom of the Mechanicus of old, and was thought long lost to history. Yet, in the manner of so many things damned by the stain of the warp, it resurges periodically to instill doubt and fear in the souls of the faithful. Having lain dormant for the better part of 8 Terran centuries, the name has appeared once more in at least a dozen confirmed remote prognostications, several readings of the Emperor's Tarot, and at least one recorded communion with a ritually summoned and bound etheric entity. The world was once a subject of the traitor Collegia Titanicus Legal Mortis, and so it is the Imperium's greatest concern that its foundries, if still they function, may be supplied arms and ammunition to the arch-traitor's body. The matter of the appearance of the demon engines, codified as the decimators, have been the subject of several previous conjunctions, and the majority of the Inquisition are agreed that the source of these vile hybrid of machine, demon, and Xenos artifice lies beyond the Laneth Rift, in the region known to Imperium as the Silent Abyss. Having gathered together a number of transcripts of the post-mortem confessions extracted by the way of Thanatos protocols, Inquisitors are now certain that the long-outlawed heretics of the spectral cult are in contact with the source of the decimators, which they appear to know as the Silent Forge. Furthermore, these transcriptions link several renegade Adeptus Astartes warbands to the Silent Forge, suggesting that the Spectral are serving in the capacity of brokers, facilitating the armies of the great enemy and gaining the service of these mighty engines of war. What the Silent Forge demands in return, or what share of the price the emissaries of the Spectral claim, can only be guessed at, but no doubt speaks to the very depths of sin and blasphemy. The name Tempora appears in but a handful of archives, all of them penned by the hands of heretics long ago consigned to the pyre. To name such a place is to invite into the soul a portion of the madness and unreality in which it steeps, and in doing court the damnation so many haven to. In his vision, the captive warpseer, known as the Oracle of Brass, describes an impossible realm of cogs and arcane mechanisms, the size of continents and mountain ranges, that can only be related to a hellforge dedicated to the ruinous power, known as the Changer of the Ways. Further reports have served to solidify the Inquisition's view that Tempora is a hellforge that entirely exists, at least partially, deep within the Eye of Terror. This gargantuan mechanism turns in patterns mortals cannot and should not fathom, for they can only serve the cause of their destruction and ruination. Samak is a hellforge of the Dark Mechanicus, wholly dedicated to the ruinous powers, located in the Jericho reach of the Segmentum Ultima, also known as the Iron Pit by the debased human renegades that travel there to trade and barter. Samak was once an Imperial Forge world, an outpost of the Adeptus Mechanicus within the former Jericho sector, famed for the skill of its tech adepts and the quality of the cognitator systems produced there. During the Jericho Reach's Age of Shadows, when the warp storm cut Jericho off from an Imperium preoccupied with more pressing concerns, world after world fell to darkness and disorder in a slow descent that marked the once proud sector's collapse into decay. For many planets, the fall was a slow one, a mere footnote for later Imperial scholars to document as the Jericho sector became a lawless reach. However, for one planet, there is an occurrence that the Adeptus Mechanicus will let none forget, when what was once a bastion of the cult Mechanicus treacherously fired upon a formerly recognized explorator fleet. For followers of the Machine God, this simple act is a declaration of utter rebellion for Samak, and enough for them to forever seek its destruction. The truth was far worse. The Omnissiah's light had been slowly dimming on the Forge world for some centuries before the infamous event. When the Hadix anomaly consumed the world in warp energies many standard years later, the Forgers were ready to seek out the ruinous powers to further their own aims, as well as alien races and archaeotech sources previously prohibited by the Edicts of Mars. Samak now stands as the main source of armaments used against the Imperium, creating profane combinations of authorized Imperial technologies, unconsecrated archaeotech, unholy creations of chaos, and even inhuman works of the Xenos. These abominations represent the real nature of Samak, a world where nothing is forbidden, when it will garner influence and stature, of brokers willing to deal with anyone or anything as long as a payment is made, of agents ever searching for undiscovered technologies to exploit. There is no morality other than the ruthless quest for power and survival in the war-torn Jericho Reach. To the Adeptus Mechanicus, Samak is a dark mirror of their own holy Forge worlds, one they dare not contemplate too closely. For the Death Watch, they are a formidable enemy, wielding arcane and technological wonders unseen by mankind. As long as Samak stands, the outlook for success in the fight against chaos is as dim as the smoke-blackened skies of the planet itself. With the coming of the Jericho Reach's Age of Shadows, darkness was cast across the region, and no world was spared. As with most Imperial sectors, the planets were heavily interdependent on each other, and as passage became more perilous, each world began to fall into disorder. Lessening contact with other worlds bred discontent and uncertainty. For Samak, a firm outpost of the Machine God, led by the most devout of tech priests, uncertainty was a cancerous seed as powerful as any direct assault from the dark powers. While other worlds fell through the long solar decades, Samak remained steadfast in its service to the Omnissiah and his Imperium. But slowly, the quorum of Magi began to question the course of action. Their system was under frequent attack from raiders, both human and Xenos, eager to pillage their works. And where was the Imperium to defend them? Their forges required raw materials, even as their weak flesh still required organic nutrition. Where were the allied worlds they relied on for trade? It was logical to conclude that Samak could only survive through self-sufficiency. Synthetic vat pastes were developed to sustain the servitors and their masters. The planet itself was plundered for whatever materials it could provide. The forges were redirected into fabricating massive macro battery emplacements and orbital defense stations to protect the planet, as well as voidcraft and mighty war machines to repel enemy vessels at a distance. All avenues of new weaponry were explored, no matter the progress of consecration levels or lack of approval from far distant Mars. No more would Samak be easy prey to a sector lost to barbarism. Attacks were ever increasing, and more the Magi viewed any knot of Samak to be against Samak. Ships entering the system were routinely fired upon. Those astropathic communications that still continued were ignored, as they could be attempts to lull the defenses before an attack. Samak endured where other worlds fell, and whatever means it took to do so, there was justification enough in that fact. The Mechanicus explorator fleet that approached Samak on the fateful day in the year 325 of the 40th millennium had no way of knowing this, only that they were grateful to have reached safe haven after the warp storms nearly tore their starship apart. Samak's defense network viewed them only as another in a series of raiders, albeit more clever than most in their duplication of ancient Mechanicus authorization cant codes. A trap was sprung, luring the damaged ship into what appeared to be a repair station. It was only as they approached too close to retreat that the docking tubes were revealed to be linear mass driver barrels, fixtures glowing not as viewports but as defense laser lenses. The fleet was eradicated, but not before it could hurl a desperate cry into the warp, telling of the treachery. It took many Terran years for word to filter back to the Imperium, but the result was clear. Samak was declared apostate in Maxima. Samak itself knew only that the possible attack fleet had been destroyed. That it seemed to be of Martian origin was irrelevant. The Quorum, by this time, viewed Samak as independent of those who did not care enough to aid their own. If Mars and the Imperium had turned their backs, then Samak would guide itself. With Jericho falling ever deeper into disorder, Samak forces began raiding other planets themselves, for in the midst of such anarchy, such had to be the way of things. The planet's security seemed to be growing until another event occurred that was to change Samak forever. One they could not have foreseen, for when the Hanex anomaly erupted like a volcanic explosion of baleful warp energies, Samak itself was cast into a space where the immaterium spilled into reality unchecked. For the tech priests, it was hellish, often literally, to see irrefutable evidence of forces that could not be quantified or even controlled, only carefully bargained with in deals for states worse than simple death. It was the final clack of a cogwheel, turning Samak away from its original purpose. Now forever melded with the ether, it did what it had done best through the past centuries. It adapted, and it survived. It was not without vigorous debate, culminating with a series of nearly devastating civil wars. However, no parties dared harm the carefully maintained forges dominating the surface and deep in the crust, and this kept Samak from falling into decay like so many other worlds in the sector. The outcome saw a new ruling system led by the faction best able to prove itself superior to others in technological command, and Samak overcame its insular paranoia. Vessels learned to navigate the unstable space now surrounding the planet, and conducted expeditions wherever there were new technologies to be had, or markets where their own marvels could be traded for raw materials and new slaves to work the forges. Ever more frequently, they searched for ancient archaeotech or arcane lore to help their own factions establish dominance over rivals. No source was too extreme, and Samak agents established ties with Xeno races across Jericho, many of which the Imperium still has not encountered. Their own star system was not neglected, as the entire area was embedded with defenses unparalleled across the sector. Most importantly, pacts with dark gods granted the Magi and their factions the power to control their new environments in exchange for supplying the Chaos Warhosts with weaponry and engines of war. It was the beginning of Samak's new role in Jericho, and the tech priests are arrogantly proud that the Imperium that had forsaken them is now terrified of their existence. Any appraisal of Samak would immediately reveal its origin as a forge world. Every planet and planetoid in the system hosts extensive mining operations, with massive machines extracting ores and minerals to feed the forges. Mass freighters connect them all to Samak itself, a world enclosed in a perpetual blanket of dark clouds. Below the clouds is the source, the stack after stack of vertical pipes rising even to the lower cloud decks and billowing thick smoke into the acrid air. No sign of the actual surface can be seen, for all is covered with layered factories, burning, creating, forging, night and day. Robed figures wander without wasteful delay in their tasks, exposed cloth allowing glimpse of artful metallic limbs. Closer examination reveals more of the real nature of Samak. Xeno vessels flit about the system, trading openly without retribution. Vast slave forces work the cruel machinery, crushed to ruin pulp should they fall. Obvious mutants walk the iron lanes connecting the complexes, undisturbed by biologist proctors seeking righteous purity. Automated multi-limb mechanisms stalk across the girders, connecting forge spires, with no tech overseer guiding their actions. And unhidden, clear to even a casual glance, the ruinous powers. Runes and glyphs of unholy meaning litter walls, declaring patronage to dark gods. Even the tech priests carry these marks upon their branded flesh, their allegiance to the machine god burned away from their synapses. The forges themselves burn with the terrible smells of burning blood and scorched flesh, fed by souls as well as promethium and steel. The blessed cogwheel is gone. Instead, there are leering metal skulls set in a circlet of spiked teeth. Possibly worse for any loyal servant of the Omnissiah would be the sense of disorder. There is no proper logical structure to the world. Forge cities rise in random fashions, lurching towards the skies and deep into the planetary crust at the whim of their lord. Factories lie in ruin elsewhere, collapsed from combat that would be unheard of on a true colony of Mars. For Samak is more than a simple fallen forge world. It is a planet in constant tension between dozens of rival forges, each fighting, scheming, and struggling for dominance. Only the forge that can intimidate, bribe, irrefutably demonstrate its mastery of all technology is fit to rule Samak, and its dark Moguls proclaims himself Furnace Lord. Such rule extends only so long as another forge does not topple it through its own exhibition of more powerful weaponry, allegiances with Xenos and Chaos Warhosts, or access to lost archaeotech. At any given time, there are perhaps a handful of forges on Samak that count themselves as dominant powers, each perhaps leading factions of numerous minor furnaces. The standing of the forges are not set in the iron thought, and will rise and fall with the fortunes of their forge lord. New exclusive rights for the discoveries made by Xeno scavengers, revelations of new technological breakthroughs, all of these could raise a lowly district to planetary power. Alternatively, the failure of a new warp drive configuration, or the loss of a slave pen due to revolt, could lower a forge lord to casting stubber shells to survive. Each forge district is constantly striving to better themselves at the expense of others. None rise so fast as when they push everyone else down under them. Most of the forges have at least in some portion made dealings with the ruinous powers, supplying their forces with needed armament and armor, and gaining power at the expense of their soul. Sabotage and spying are constant, and a forge is often only as prosperous as its own security force are effective. The forges are as varied as the maraud of raw materials they burn, chew, and remake into the weapons and vehicles for which Samak has become infamous. Some, such as Hexel, in many ways, preserves their ancient way of slow study and careful refinement, with their extensive collection of rare tech patterns, allowing them to retain valuable markets. While it in no way espouses retreating to the close-mindedness of the Adeptus Mechanicus, their tech priests still see the value of deliberation and caution. Their mechanisms are always of the highest quality, such that many of their customers also supply tithe warriors to help defend the district and ensure regular delivery of their supplies. The majority of the forges, though, feel the opposite, frantic to extend their technological reach wherever it might lead in their pursuit of power. Forge Dimaris has constructed technological heresies that walk and perhaps even think like men. Delos Tuval's district has produced prismatic engines that glow with unnatural light and derive power from drained energies. The Forge seems to have mastered infusing souls with machines to create demonic engines of fury and steel. Even more reckless in their quest for knowledge is the Cambrid Bridge, where heretechs study the interactions of the tenuous membranes that bound reality to the immaterium. Their replications of warp eruptions, the better to master the Sea of Souls, has destroyed several small asteroids and portions of one moon. Most have extensive explorator fleets, roaming the Jericho Reach for new xenospecies to exploit, archaeotech to loot, and civilizations to enslave, frequently clashing with Deathwatch teams acting to counter their aims, and rogue traders seeking to do exactly the same, but in the Emperor's name. There is a smattering of small manufactorum controlled by their own workers, the serfs and slaves having perhaps overthrown their master, or else the tech priests functionaries decided it was more logical that their Magos lords not interfere with their operations. As long as the contracts are filled, there is little opposition, though such forges are always at risk from conquest of more legitimate powers. The Underforge of Kith is literally underground, stealing resources and siphoning power where they can keep their furnaces burning. They deal with all, no matter the established contracts, and are the bane of other forges. Their factories, regularly destroyed, they roam the ancient infrastructure that descends deep into the planet, rebuilding from forgotten old forges and mining operations. And those were 40 facts on the Hellforge. And I'll talk to you tomorrow. This is Gershwan with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first.